Hey, and welcome to this next episode of The Human Loop. I have just finished recording with Andrew Fahey from Briars. What an episode. So in this episode, you're going to hear Andrew talking about the disruption and transformation that AI is having in the professional services area. He is also going to share with you an incredible customer experience process, like it's truly human in the loop process that they have created within their organization. I'm lit up by it. It is such an exciting advancement. The conversation, we cover everything from internal leading people, being that human in the loop as a leader, all the way through to how we can improve customer experience as businesses, as workers. So make sure you tune into this episode of The Human Loop. The Human Loop podcast, powered by Ethereum. Andrew, first question. It's 2026. Mm-hmm. If you were to give one piece of advice to another CEO, business owner about how not to screw up 2026 and the opportunity in front of them, what piece of advice would you give?
That's a great question. We all have a tendency as humans, new year, new us, and we sort of enter with this unbelievable optimism about how everything's going to change, how everything's different. My counsel would be realistic, ease ourselves into it. The economy's still tough, people still tough, the birth of AI and how we're doing it's still tough. Be practical and don't make yourself fail too quickly by being too optimistic. Just ease yourself into the growth for 2026.
Okay. That's a shame. I need to heed some of that advice myself, I think. It's good advice. It's good advice. And you, there's a lot going on, like geopolitically and with our economy and, and with business as well. So I think there always is that there feels like there is a sense of optimism in the economy in specific sectors. I know in the recruitment sector that I've got some experience in, and I know Briars do work in as well. There is an undercurrent that mandates are up. People have more live vacancies. And, just in the first few days of this year, the customers that I work with, that I've been speaking to are predicting big years. So I think there's a really nice message there that you shared of like, let's make sure we're measured.
It's setting the baseline on what good looks like, coming out of a difficult period, a recessionary environment, whatever we want to call this position, making sure that your sort of Q1 targets are not those that are reflective of an extremely sort of buoyant, but incremental improvements. As you said, there are markers out there that things are slowly starting to improve. So ease yourself into that in line with how markets develop.
Yeah, great. And tell me in our audience like a bit more about Briars and the areas you operate in and how you've got a really powerful position, I think, to be able to share what you're seeing across industries.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, of course. So the Briars really simply help businesses expand from their own domestic region into different countries. And we do that by a really simple premise of saying, well, you understand the widget that you make, the service that you deliver, the product that you produce better than anyone else. But as you move into different countries, then you're crossing different regulatory environments, different tax jurisdictions, different employment frameworks. We'll just block and tackle all of that for you. We'll be your back office across your accounting, tax, finance, FX, global mobility, HR. So you can just do what you do best and not have to worry about falling foul of all these new things that nobody really wanted to worry about when they invented this product that they want to take over the world. And so we do have an interesting perspective. We have around 3,000 active clients operating in around 100 different countries at any moment in time. So fingers in lots of different economies, and we get to see trends across lots of different sectors as well. And I guess the other interesting point that we may dip in and out of is most of our clients tend to be in and around their first private equity investments as well. So we get a sense of how the market's operating on that way. And that's because when private equity invests in a business, they usually want you to double in size from what you've done usually. But then selling more things to more people, which usually means them going into different countries and taking that idea as well. So we're a great sort of tool to parachute into those companies to help them do that.
Nice. And you're also private equity backed as a business, aren't you? So you've got that empathy as well, which I think is really helpful. Helpful. And just a quick shout out to Briars. With one of my businesses, that's how we met. Like we use Briars. You're a great partner for that business to help us enter the US market. So I can wholeheartedly recommend Andrew and his team. He's not paid me for this either, which is a shame. Moving on. So if we're thinking about 2026, there was a lot of noise about a certain topic last year, and that was AI. Of course, it dominated leaders' minds, it dominated news feeds, and I think in certain industries, particularly in professional services, there's been some really interesting implications, and I'd love to get your insight of the businesses that you're supporting in across professional services specifically, how you've seen AI either disrupt and transform some of those industries and service lines, or equally some examples where it just hasn't touched them.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, once you take all the fancy vernacular around global expansion away, that's what Briars is. We are a professional service business. We deliver tax, accounting, HR, legal, payroll services to businesses all around the world. And I've spent my entire career in and around professional service as well, in the UK and internationally. And one of the things that's always surprised me really about professional services is how long it's got away with its pricing structure. And it's quite an odd thing to say as somebody who leads professional services businesses, and I'd like to think our pricing isn't like this, but in the main, most professional services businesses have a big clock, and when you ask them to do something, the clock starts and they do the doing, and when the clock finishes, it stops. And that's been that way for hundreds of years. And the whole development of personnel works that way. The new staff come in and they start at the bottom and they type financial transactions into spreadsheets, and they take bank statements and they cross-check them and reconcile them. And then they might then progress to sort of moving payroll journals around the accounts. And that's exactly how it's worked for over 100 years now. And AI changes that instantly. The ability to pay or charge your client for bog standard data manipulation inputted is removed, has been removed. And that's a fundamental flip of the whole professional services industry. And many, as we've all changed, there'll be the change curve, and there'll be people still saying, well, the way I input into a spreadsheet is far better than anyone else inputs into a spreadsheet, so I'm going to carry on doing that. And there'll be those that are at the leading edge as well. But I guess what we're seeing in our own business, we have a transformation director in our business whose job is just to purely think about how do we stay ahead of this. But we're seeing it as well when we're speaking to new clients coming in, and you're talking about pricing very much now about the so what, rather than the, oh, okay, well, you can do my accounts in that country, brilliant.
Yeah.
So what? Everybody else can do that. I could probably do it myself. There's probably now, enough sort of technology and with support through AI to muddle through and do it myself. So the so what has really flipped professional services on its head. And my sort of, I'm going to give you a really weird analogy now, from bear with a really weird analogy.
Come on then, let's go.
So when we were all in primary school, we did a little experiment where you had 2 balls of cotton wool and you put cress seeds in the cotton wool. and you put one of them on the windowsill and you put one of them in the cupboard, and sort of 12 weeks later, the teacher got them out and and they both grown. The one on the windowsill, though, because they had access to sunlight and through the sort of had grown strong and powerful, and the one in the cupboard had still grown, but it was all weak and limp. Those professional services businesses that are just focused on doing the doing are going to be the cress in the cupboard, and those who've embraced those human skills of relationship management, investing into the strategic direction of the businesses, will be the cress on the windowsill. I told you it was weird, but that's how my brain compartmentalizes.
There we go. I love that. I love that. There's I've got this like quite you shared that very well. I've got this image of like kind of still stinted, very translucent cress, and then like green, fibrous, tall, leafy. I kind of wanted to draw a face on it and put it in an egg or something like that. So look, let's go with that analogy. My reflection is maybe a bit more stark than that, probably from what I see, in that actually I'm not sure the cress in the cupboard is going to be there, like in that period of time. And I think that the way that the world of work is transforming, and margins are really, margins are tight because of cost of living, increases in employing people globally as well, not just kind of in the UK, Europe, and the US. I actually think that it's probably going to be a bit faster, and you might have that strong professional services business right now, but it could be 6 months with the way that AI adoption and agentic processes are working, that actually you could be priced out of your business model very quickly. And we know that businesses cash flow is king. And actually, if you get priced out and your cash flow gets hit, then you're going to be either a target for a very low value acquisition, or you're going to have some problems.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But again, and I think accounting's an easy one to look at. But ultimately, that race to the bottom to utilize and harness the power of AI, for those accountancy practices who still stop at just there's the production of the set of accounts, that's my point, that actually you now need to be far more, and there's a whole industry with underdeveloped skills and services, hence the weak crest and the strong crest, because they focus so much just on doing the doing. And AI will, as you say, allow that to happen almost instantaneously. What it won't do is it won't understand the risk profile of the person you're dealing with, and it won't understand the pressures of the shareholders, and it won't understand the strategic direction, and it won't understand how that failed last year, and it won't understand how that's... So all the value you can add on the so what around the accounts is still there, and that's the pivot that needs to happen. And as you said, probably happen now. This isn't well, let's plan over the next 5, 6, 7 years. That has to happen now. But those skills are not easy to develop. That's a lifetime of development of sort of relationship building and strategic advice.
Yeah, completely. And I think, you mentioned human skills earlier, which I love, because I have a pet peeve with the phrase soft skills, because they're not soft. They're bloody hard to learn. And so actually I agree. And I've been speaking to my accountancy firm, and they are very, very pro on what you've paid for value before is now the basement. It's the so what, and you're right, it's the context that comes from I guess is wisdom, isn't it? It's knowledge over time and experience. So actually in professional services, what will set you apart will be human to human relationship, authenticity, aligned values, care, empathy, and ultimately wisdom. And so And so if we're looking at that, and I think we're agreed and aligned on that. This is really interesting when we're looking at the interface of humans and AI and this human in the loop element. So I think a question for you then is your business is at the forefront of running these professional services on behalf of people to, as you say, like be the blocker so that they can focus on the Hail Mary. We are mixing our analogies, but they can focus on ultimate growth and their widget being the sexiest widget out there, etc. But also, I know you're working with professional service businesses as well. So you've got this really interesting view there. So in your business, how are you looking at use cases for AI and experiments, etc., to be able to then free people up to do that higher value work?
Yeah. And there's probably 3 or 4 different waves of it. So one of the things, and this sounds simple, but I often find businesses that do the simple things well, the businesses that do best. So every one of our divisional leaders now within their annual objectives has a requirement to have 4 use cases of where AI is significantly freeing up people to point them at value add or improving margin in relation to that. So it's actually a measure now that exists within our business. So that's one. There are 2 ways, and I don't want to share too much, from a sort of giving away IP, but there's 2 buckets of things that we do really. So number 1 is, where can we just put that human brain onto that holistic picture, the so what, the advice. So we're trying to move away, as we talked about before, from we've received, let's say we have a client who operates across 15 different countries. So the way that works traditionally is there will be 15 different and they've usually grown through M&A as well. So technically they're 15 different businesses that have just been rebranded. And our job then is to be the glue that holds all those together, because in the investment thesis, there was going to be consolidation of doing that. So we actually have 15 different charts of accounts. We have 15 different processes. We have 15 different currencies and ways of doing things. And the old way of doing that would be to take it all together and make sure each individual sort of set of accounts is sort of works, and then roll up into some big group structure where we have consolidated reporting. We can now churn through that in a matter of seconds, if not minutes, which then really allows us to then have those conversations around, this is what the group's saying, that entity's underperforming. You don't need that entity. Actually, if we had a European hub here, we could take 2 or 3 of these out. Therefore, there's £5 million saved on the bottom line. We would never have got to that information, because 99.9% of the time, right up to the deadline, is just trying to pull all this craziness together. And so across every one of those professional service disciplines, we're looking at that, whether it's accounting, tax, whether it's FX, HR, payroll, where is the huge volumes of unstructured data coming from multiple different sources, which people don't have the ability to look at that holistic picture. And we're harnessing AI to do that. The second thing then is more externally facing. As I said earlier on, there's around 100 different countries. So I would need 100 employment lawyers, 100 tax specialists, and I would need, the equivalent in every single discipline, because regulation in every country is fluid. Everybody has laws that are changing all the time. Everybody has their own budgets. Everybody has that. It's almost like now I have this huge capillary network where I can look out and I real time be fed back what's changing, which clients do I have in those regulations, what's the risk of that happening instantaneously. And so I have a global, almost scouting network for regulations that either A, impacts current clients, or B, I can proactively take into a solution to try and win clients in markets as well. So at a really high level, they're the 2 different ways that we're trying to use AI to sort of supercharge the Briars proposition.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's It gives the scale you're talking about and the complexity. As we said, it's the opportunity to still be the human in the loop and have the wisdom, but then simplify that complexity and be able to, I guess, over deliver at pace. Over deliver at pace, but with added value in terms of consolidation of those hypothetical 5 European businesses, etc. All right, so I think we've covered that area really nicely. Like, actually, where are the use cases within Briars, and that's quite external facing. Have you looked at anything internally in terms of how you operate, like as a leadership team or within the organization? Where are you at on that journey?
Yes. So, and it's slightly externally facing, but it links to development. So, in addition to AI, there's a continual sort of need, I think, in professional services to deliver a client experience which is above and beyond. Early on in my career, I once got told there was an article, let's just call it Financial Advisor Weekly, I don't know what it was, but it positioned professional services akin to doing the dishes. And so after I sort of like gasped, was like, my entire career has been wasted. Actually, the point it was making is it's just unnecessary evil. You went into business because you have a passion for leadership development, for AI, for improving humans, and a byproduct of that is you need to understand employment law and you need to understand tax legislation. And actually, when you think about it like that, you sort of say, actually, almost being invisible is the right solution for a professional service. So CX has been a huge thing for me all along. Now, the problem with that is when you try to analyze how good you are in a human-led business, you sit down and say, okay, let's talk about how the clients perceive you. Absolutely love me. I'm fantastic. I couldn't be better. Oh, okay, really interesting. And how do you know that? Well, have a look at this and this conversation, and here's some audit notes, and actually, everybody can sort of then go through this process of validation, and we all sort of convince ourselves that, we are fine. We should give ourselves a 5-star Trustpilot review. We're fantastic. We're fantastic. And we've had some instances where that has happened, and a client has said, actually, we won't be renewing the contract. And there's this sort of moment of disbelief of sort of, everybody loves you, love me, you wrote down and there's this. So what we've been able to do now is to take the weak part of that, which is human emotion, out of it. So if we we use it as well as, so for example, let's use you. We take all the email communication between one of your businesses and us. We take our invoices. We take the speed that you paid those invoices. We take what we call incidents, where we know that a mistake has happened, but we fixed it before you did. We take all those incidents and we put them in, and we take any complaints that have come in. And then we also take our external benchmarking and we put it in, and it then gives us a completely impartial view of how satisfied that client is. And we then take the content of all client meetings. So we record all our clients, so we put all the transcripts in as well. And then it spits out an impartial view of how happy that client is and where we're not doing. And it's as absolutely the client example that I gave, where we convinced ourselves we were fine, the beta test that we did spat out and said, yeah, this is an amber risk, you should be looking at that.
That's cool.
And so it has been unbelievable. And it's still hard because we still got to manually pull lots of data together. But there's no subjectivity in it at all. There's no emotion. There's nobody saying, I don't want to say that because that makes me look bad, so I'm going to just twist this conversation. And so how we now think about developing our staff in relation to their human skills, there's a impartial, huge set of data that everybody receives audits on at regular points through the year. And so it's almost like having a AI generated business coach. And that sits still with our leaders and our team who talk about and develop people with the skills and their communication. But the first time that happened, we were all completely blown away around this is fantastic. It's horrible because it makes you look in a mirror in ways that you sort of don't want to, but it's fantastic. It will be the thing that allows us to deliver on our what we call our fanatical client experience, non-negotiable. So that's been a huge way that we use it internally.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. That is very, very cool. And I think one of the bits that is very effective, I imagine, about it is it's a single source of truth. And it's not, let's say that you and me, both historically would lead teams of 3 to 5, and we would sit down and appraise them based on their customer relationship management, etc. We'd probably start with, historically, before this very cool CX process you've outlined, with have they renewed? What's their increase in spend?
Yeah.
And what's the feedback? And the feedback would be like, I take them out, took them out for golf, they're renewing, etc. But actually what I love about the spectrum of the data points you're talking about there, you've got subjective in the flow of work, emails, meetings, notes, etc. So you've got human to human interaction that then you're quantifying with prompts and natural language processing, etc. Then you've got data points of internal, like incidents that have, risks that didn't become issues, for want of a better phrase. Yeah. But then you've got, I guess, issues that the customer came back with and the time of fixing that stuff. So there's a great process there. And I know you said at the moment it's manual, etc., but it won't be long, I imagine, before you can agentically have that in a dashboard in semi-real time.
And we definitely will. And one of the really cool parts about it, so if you take that analogy and you and I are having that conversation, I certainly, and I'm not sure, would have probably never have thought of going to the finance team and checking on how frequent and prompt a payer that client was, because psychologically that's a real big tell.
Yeah.
And actually, just by having even that in, it's like, oh, okay. But actually, since that incident, the time it takes that client to pay is slowed down, which is, there's a human part, but there's definitely a British part. It's complaining by stealth, isn't it? That, then you're sort of like, I don't want to say this, so what I'm going to do is a breadcrumb trail of slightly irritated behavior that maybe you're smart enough to see. And we see that now through this.
Yeah, and also, I guess, coming back to the human in the loop bit. So the human in the loop bit in me thinks, and I guess like the performance coach and the sales analyst in me thinks, right, so if on our dashboard, one of the alerts is there's been an increase in like debtor days. So the number of days that this customer typically pays their invoice, or they are historically quite slow. Yeah, I'm thinking actually, like how good is my relationship with the payer, like the decision maker that actions the pay? It might not be the CEO or the MD. It's actually, have I got a relationship with the CFO or the FD? And are they receiving that in their preferred payment method? Yeah. Actually, they might just want a go cardless link and a direct debit, but we're still pushing them invoices that require bank transfers, etc.
But you just didn't know, and now you know. There's a plethora of different things that you can do to improve that, but we know now, and we know really quickly, and that's really exciting for us.
Yeah, I'm going to carry on like the single source of truth line, because that is what you've just shared is fantastic. And offline, I'd love to talk to you more about that, maybe how I build that into Ethereum, because part of the benefits about doing this show is I get to hear about amazing processes like that. So kudos, well done, mate. I have been speaking to a number of CEOs and MDs as part of the pilot process for Ethereum. And one of the things that's been interesting has been the disparate way that they have one-to-one performance meetings. Okay, all right. So I'm not talking about a pastoral, how you doing? Let's have a chat. I'm talking about how are you doing at achieving your objectives, tasks, OKRs, KPIs, whatever it might be. And one of the businesses I was speaking to is a 1,000 person professional services business in the UK. And I was speaking to their chief people officer, and I asked them, what's your process for one-to-ones? And the answer I was not expecting was, some managers email their employees back with their actions, but mostly we do an end of year review. Right. And that's at one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, I'm seeing more and more businesses now that will do in person, face-to-face one-to-ones, and they'll set up a Teams call, they'll record it, they'll transcribe it so that there is a cloud-based single source of truth for accountability, etc. Where do you sit on either end of that spectrum?
Complete transparent, not as good as I want to be, but better than those examples. So, but I'm going to start by answering something slightly different. That I think we're a really interesting. I'm going to lump you in my age category, whether you like it or not, for the purpose of this. But we're a really interesting generation that we started our work life in a full-time in the office, face-to-face. We then completely flipped to fully virtual and are now all wrestling with some weird type of hybrid environment. So we're a generation that has got a strange reference point, which is predominantly in a world that doesn't exist now. But I don't think we as leaders and businesses have solved some of the problems that were maybe done ineffectively or inefficiently, but were solved in the previous incarnation. So how do we allow our people to learn by osmosis? How do we get people to just understand social skills and of being in a sort of business community that is multi-generational, multi-ethnicity, multi-country in my case, when we're all in this really remote way? So I guess, and I don't have the answer to it as well, which really worries me. Personally, I'm professionally as well. So what we actually do is we have formal quarterly reviews, which are probably a little bit more run-of-the-mill, and they're split into 3 different chunks. How did the business perform financially, and how did your cog of the wheel do to that? What were your personal objectives in relation to that, and are you now 25% of the way through them relative to where we are in the year? Woven through all of those are our non-negotiable behaviours. And the 3 of them are: we are fanatical about our client's experience, we are guardians of our own and our client's culture, because we're an outsourcing business, so we have to chameleon and take on other cultures as we do that, and we're trailblazers of innovation. And so, in theory, you could have hit your targets and be on track and have still had a poor review, because you're a bit of a bad apple who disrupted everybody and didn't live those non-negotiable behaviours. And so we try and over-formalise the human element of those behaviours in there, because I don't know how I systemise and productise it yet. Mm-hmm. If I take my personal life, I have a 19-year-old son who completed his GCSEs fully remotely because of COVID, his A-levels partly virtual, and the second year of his degrees in a different country. He consumes through micro-learning. But when I look at him as a polished individual, he has no idea how the world works, social skills and stuff. He's a smart guy and he's doing really well, but I worry for how we support that next generation through, and how we get the benefits of technology, but actually we teach people some really foundational stuff. And I know I'm sort of going on, but I had a conversation yesterday with a chap who leads a global relocation business. And we were talking about the human side of that, which was really interesting. And he said, 90% of everything you know, you don't know how you know. And I was like, what? And he said, well, you know the post boxes are red in the UK, and you know that there's such a thing called car tax, and you know that actually you probably have to register for a permit if you want to do AB, and you don't know how you know that. But when I drop you into a different country, all that stuff that you just know, you now don't know. So it's not about where do you want to live and which housing estate and have you got a great job. You now don't know. You're like Bambi. You just don't know anything about anything. And I worry that our next generation of people are a little bit up like that as well. So, and that's a long-winded answer. But then on top of that, we just have regular check-ins and the stuff as well that all rolls up into that data pool.
Yeah. Okay. And then those, I'm going to come back to the human element and generational behaviors. Just want to come back to the last bit you said. We have regular check-ins and that data. Is that data like do you transcribe one-to-ones? Are you keeping?
Yeah. So there's all the financial data. It's all the objective data is controlled through a centralized project management and workflow system. I'm not sure I want to plug the name of them, but very famous one. That's in there. And then all the conversations, both the employees' notes and the manager's notes are recorded as the two part. What we haven't done is live transcribed the conversation, which is interesting because you're making me think about that now. There has definitely been instances over my career where you get to the end and people say, that's not what I said.
Yeah.
Because you cleanse it when you write your notes, probably when it's been...
you cleanse it when you write your notes. It's also your subjective view of reality, which is different. Yeah. The way we're experiencing this show is very different right now, even though it feels like it should be the same conversation. We're actually having two different conversations, slightly. We're not directly opposite each other. And then there's an amazing thing that our brain does that after 72 hours... and this comes into like you don't know how you know it. After 72 hours of a conversation, someone's reflection of the facts that happened in that conversation are something like 60% wrong.
That's why you carry on having children. Because your memory of how horrific it was at the start changes over time. You go, do you remember that program? Oh, it was so lovely. It was amazing. Let's have another one.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
I was up for 6 months. Yeah. The human bit. So park that transcription bit in your head. Have a think about that for you as a business. Yeah. I was talking to a marketing agency. They're about 65 people a couple of weeks ago, and they have been transcribing to start with, now visually recording all of their one-to-ones for about the last 4 or 5 years. And they obviously need co-agreement from both parties, etc. But the CEO said to me, I said to him, why? I know my idea why. I was like, why 5 years ago? And he said to me, 5 years ago, I began to think that at some point there will be a really good kind of talent identification use case for all of our people data. Like who makes a good employee in this organization? What's our culture look like? Where we did lots of growth, what was the cultural kind of analysis there? And he said, I knew we didn't have the capability yet, but I wanted to be ready. And my mind was like, whoa, that's incredible foresight. I'll leave that one there for you. Coming back to the conversation about, I guess, like Gen Z, Gen Alpha coming into the workforce. I agree. And I think there's going to need to be some very important foundational influencing skills, conversational skills, curiosity skills, I think, that are going to need to be taught at an employer level.
Yeah.
And I think, the days of our generation, where onboarding was about what you do, I think onboarding in the future is going to be a lot about like how.
Yeah. I mean,
how do you do business?
If you take the two elements of this conversation, that if AI generates a world where the human in the loop actually now needs to focus on something completely different, yet the workforce that are entering are underserved and underskilled on the human types of behaviors, we're heading for a bit of a car crash from a sort of a structural perspective, generationally. We're going, and that's the bit, that was the worry bit that I was saying, I don't know how we stop that happening.
Well, I guess market forces are an interesting, that will be at play. So we could end up with just a very dull transactional like business environment, but because of market forces and like competition, I think there is going to be a push that actually those individuals that are able to super adapt and lean into those human skills will be able to differentiate themselves vastly to order takers or prompt pushers. And I think so like from a parenting perspective, I mean, my kids are younger than your oldest. I've got 9.5-year-old and 8-year-old. And we have this like conversation. It's like screen time. Is screen time bad or good? Yeah. I think it's the type of screen time. But also it's having conversations and providing challenge for them to be in social situations.
I'm sure you've heard the sort of the stories around make the order when you're in a restaurant. The shabby hair looking down, mumble. No, dip in that. It's the equivalent of, and it's just little things like that. But I agree. I think that it's not hard to differentiate yourself at the moment, but as this progresses, I think it will be harder, because the world sort of post-COVID just a bit average, because everybody cut costs really hard and it never really went back. So things that are an okay service are probably a poor service, and things that are a good service. So anyone who gets that right really will kick on and have an opportunity. That's
awesome. I'm going to leave our conversation there. I think that is a lovely place to end, Andrew. And I think it wraps up your like amazing share in terms of that CX process. Look, it's been a pleasure talking to you again. Had the pleasure of coming on your podcast last year. I wish you and Briars like huge success in 2026. It's great. I've had the pleasure of working with your leadership team. Great bunch of people. So thank you so much for coming on the Human Loop.
Yeah, excellent. And it was lovely to be here, and I hope people found it interesting.
Cheers, mate.